Claro que sí, Lorena, muchas gracias. Realmente ponencias imperdibles a lo largo de esta Zoomathon de 24 horas. Muchas gracias a todos los doctores que han representado al Ecuador, a la doctora Rebeca de México y a la doctora Iris von Horsen de Chile. Muchísimas gracias a todos ellos. Y ahora vamos a dar espacio a la doctora Cathy May Lemmon, que ella va a representar a Estados Unidos. Por favor, si la doctora Cathy ya se encuentra en sala.
Oops.
Hey, Dr. Cathy.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
we can hear you. Yeah, we can
Okay,
hear you.
okay.
So welcome to our Zoomathon.
Thank you. I'm
And
very happy to be here.
thank you very much. It's an honor for us to have you here with all your expertise in homeopathy area. So welcome, and now is your turn.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much. Let me see. I unfortunately I don't speak Spanish, and so I don't know, was any sort of an introduction given? Should I just share about myself or should I just dive in and just start sharing?
You can just dive in and start sharing since we
Okay.
finished and gave thanks to all the Latin American part. So
Okay.
yes, you can just dive in
Okay.
and start sharing your.
Okay. Well, let me start my
So, Dr. Cathy,
screen
please,
share.
a few minutes. We have a very important answer asked for Doctora Rebeca. Lore, si es que lo podrías ver en el chat de José Omar, pregunta a Rebeca si tiene alguna experiencia de manejo en síndrome de Down y cómo lo enfoca. Tenemos unos minutitos para que la doctora Rebeca, perdón, pueda responder.
Sí, Dr. Cathy, you give us a minute since we're still on time. There's one question.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's good. Rebeca, José Omar ha preguntado si tiene experiencia con el manejo de síndrome de Down y cómo lo enfocaría si es que tienes esa experiencia, por favor. Sí, ya te puse para que hagas el mute.
Mira, José, yo sí he trabajado con varias patologías. Síndrome de Down no excluye que puedan tener algunos procesos de hiperactividad, de agresividad, problemas de aprendizaje. Sí los trabajaría, pero en la cuestión de lo que queremos madurar. En sí, a lo mejor mis investigaciones no han sido tan profundas con síndrome de Down, porque síndrome de Down presenta otros tipos de problemáticas genéticas como son los soplos en corazón. Bueno, ¿cómo te diré? Sí los trabajo también, me apoyo para esos soplos en el corazón, pero no me he metido 100% en una investigación para buscar evitar que se generen más patologías en síndrome de Down. Sí trabajo con las cuestiones de tiroides, que también tienen alteración en las de tiroides, pero como mis investigaciones son muy enfocadas a autismo, pues yo prefiero presentarme como una experta en autismo. Sí apoyo síndrome de Down cuando es necesario, pero mis investigaciones no han sido tan profundas para ellos. Entonces no me puedo decir que soy una experta en síndrome de Down, pero igual lo que se requiera se te puede apoyar, y si necesitas que también te dé algunos medicamentos que se pueden trabajar con personas con síndrome de Down, con mucho gusto te los hago llegar.
Muchas gracias, Rebeca. Okay, it looks like that was the last question. And we're perfectly on time. So Cathy, you can start now your presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you again. All right, well, let me start the screen share, make sure I share the right screen. Okay, well, it's a pleasure for me to be here. I'm a homeopath. My practice is headquartered, I guess, in the Dallas, Texas area. Although, of course, I work internationally with a lot. And I guess this presentation, while I have not been able to take in everything as far as what's been taking place during this Zoomathon for Hanuman's birthday today, this is what I'm going to present will probably be a little bit different because a lot of it's been brought to my attention, and I don't know if everybody has questions about this, but at the same time, since there have been, I thought, well, why not just go ahead and talk about what homeopathy, what's been going on with homeopathy here in the United States. Just and I think as we take a grasp over what it is that we have in homeopathy, we should be very, very encouraged. I saw a comment there about how homeopaths in South America are better than those in North America. Well, I think the bigger view on that would be more probably that, yeah, you know what, we have a whole lot that we can be learning from each other. And oops, that just reminds me that I haven't turned my phone off, so let me take care of that. So that won't be interrupting us. There. Because I know I don't know everything. Um, I have worked with homeopaths around the world, and I have learned from every one of them. And I hope that we can learn, especially because we're in this horrid COVID situation around us, that what we need to do is we need to stand together within homeopathy. And I just want us to be proud. I want us to be excited. I want us to be very, very confident with what we have with homeopathy, because it has withstood the test of time for more than 200 years, because its principles, as we know, they're ancient principles based on Hippocrates and even older than. They are solid and they work. And so what we have, what I'm going to present to you, of course, because as you probably know, the big focus that I have is homeoprophylaxis, the prophylactic use of homeopathic medicines. That the more that I have been studying this, the more it's the more crystal clear it's becoming how this is really one of the integral parts of homeopathy. When I was first toying around with this 20 some odd years ago, when I was first learning that there was a prophylactic use for homeopathic medicines, I remember talking to a homeopath who really tried to poo-poo it all. But I look at that, and what I see is I see that they really didn't really understand. And so what I have to present to you, it's going to be a bit of history of overall homeopathy, because a lot of it is not fully understood. But there's also so much that I realized as I was putting this together that there's no way I can encapsulate this into it. It turns out Dr. Shraji had a whole hour that he gave the United States, and every one of the speakers that I was trying to get to come in with this had one reason or another they couldn't be here. So it's just me you got to put up with. And I guess that being said, if what I share does not take up this full hour, there will be plenty of time for any questions if you have any of these. So let me begin, I guess, here. You see the icon in the lower left-hand corner. That is my organization, the nonprofit Homeoprophylaxis, a worldwide choice for disease prevention. This is what I've been able to put together the international conferences with, and this is really what I think we need to. Not that you necessarily need to utilize HP, homeoprophylaxis, in your own practices, but just realize that it is what it is. Here is what I'm going to start with, hopefully. There we go. Okay, here is Dr. Arthur Grimmer. He's a former president of the American Institute of Homeopathy and the International Hanumani Society, which I don't have time to get into what all this is. But here is something that he shared back in 1949. He said this: "It is our duty to invite physicians of all schools of healing to test fully the homeopathic art of protection against epidemic diseases. If such tests were honestly made by sincere men of all schools of healing, homeopathy would reach its place in the sun. That's how proud and how confident we need to be standing as far as homeopathic medicines. And then here's a short video I'm going to share with you that was taken at the last conference for my organization that took place in New Delhi a year ago, January. Let me just play this for you. So, and interviewed here is Dr. Raj K. Manchanda, the Director General of Ayush. So please listen to what he has to say.
Today, on the second day of this conference on homeoprophylaxis, we have with us ex-Director General of CCRH and now Director Ayush. Let's talk to him. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ji.
Sir, as you have already done so much for the homeopathy and you keep on doing this, and this two-day international conference you have organized, so how this idea of homeoprophylaxis came into your mind?
So, as we know that historically, homeopathy has been used for the prevention of infectious diseases. In fact, the reason why homeopathy is now spread almost in 100 countries is its success in homeoprophylaxis. So, this Central Council for Research in Homeopathy for the last quite some years have developed a strategy for the prevention of certain diseases where there is no vaccine is available in allopathic system of medicine. So if we can develop homeopathy prevention strategy for such infections, so it will be a great thing. So considering that, we have invited all the international experts, those who have done something or are ready to have some knowledge and are ready to help our scientists to do. In CCRH, we have started indeed certain basic research experiment and even certain clinical research experiments, and we have seen that results are quite encouraging. Eventually, I feel that profession is going to be benefited by this kind of research.
Now, bear in mind, too, that this conference took place again, it was January of 2020. This was right before everything was hitting the fan as far as the COVID-19. And so this is where Dr. Manchanda, he is very, very well known all throughout India, all throughout that part of Asia, very well known. So hold fast to what he has shared here. And as I proceed, just so you will understand that it is not homeoprophylaxis. Again, the prophylactic use of homeopathic medicines is not something brand new. Let's go back all the way. Well, first of all, let's let me get my presentation straight here. Homeopathy in epidemics and pandemics. Let's look at this. What is disease? Just so that we understand this, Webster's Medical Dictionary, produced right here in the United States, says that disease is a sickness or ailment caused by germs or viruses with consistent results. Okay, in other presentations that I make, I get more into this, but this is just what I want to be understood for us here. In Hahnemann's Organon, aphorism 8, he shares disease is a state of being of the organism dynamically untuned, I love that phrase, by a disturbed vital force, or an alteration in the state of health. He disagrees, and I love this little interchange that's kind of shared in his Organon, with how the chief head and past authority of the old school, Christoph Wilhelm Friedrich Hufeland, the chief medical officer to the king, he was a CWF Hufeland, was a medical authority at the time of Hahnemann. But what Hufeland liked to say was homeopathy can remove the symptoms, but the disease remains. Well, Hahnemann, right there, you can read this in aphorism 8, says that is nonsense. When the body is well, it is well. Okay, that's not Hahnemann's words, that's my presentation of his words, but you can pull up aphorism 8 and read that yourself. Aphorism 9, he goes further, he says, in the state of health, the spirit-like vital force, or the dynamis, is animating the material human organism, reigns in supreme sovereignty. Health is Hahnemann took this so seriously. It maintains the sensations and activities of all the parts of the living organism in a harmony that obliges wonderment. The reasoning spirit who inhabits the organism can thus freely use this healthy living instrument to reach the lofty goal of human existence. You think about the big pictures that this presents. Common medicine today, conventional medicine, allopathic medicine, likes to have things defined down to the very tiniest little detail. But Hahnemann says, let's look at the big picture. Let's look at the big picture. aphorism 11, he even gets further into what disease is and how it acts. He has a brilliant comparison there to the rotation of the planet, the moon, its effects on tides, the magnetic force, how these work without being seen. He was, this is his birthday. Let's praise him because of how prophetic he truly was, how much he really saw. A few more definitions I'll just share with you quickly here. What is an epidemic? Okay, a rapidly spreading disease. This is Webster's Medical Dictionary again. Rapidly spreading disease that affects many people at one time in the same area. Well, then you'd have to get back to what a disease is and all this. Okay, let's look at what Dorothy Shepherd, you probably are familiar with her book, Homeopathy and Epidemic Diseases. She says an epidemic, widespread outbreaks of a disease affecting simultaneously a number of people in one or several neighborhoods, and even whole districts, states, or countries. Let's be more specific there. And Jay Yasgur, there's a wonderful homeopathic dictionary I would encourage every one of you to get to if you don't have it. I thought I had a copy of it. Well, anyway, this is what he says. An acute disease which spreads rapidly from place to place, affecting large numbers of persons. A contagious disease which spreads rapidly. Okay, and then what's a pandemic? Yasgur says an epidemic of widespread proportions, which may even spread across oceans to other continents. Okay, well, here's what's interesting, because Webster's dictionary says simply a pandemic is a widely spread epidemic. So just take these definitions to heart for what they are, for what we're in today, and for what we need to grasp firm hold of as far as what we know and are utilizing in homeopathy. And let's look further at the Organon, the 6th edition here. Aphorism 100 says every epidemic presents a new disease. It's not yet another disease of COVID-19 or whatever it is. It's a new disease. Why does he say that? Because we have to look at the unique symptoms within each epidemic to ascertain the proper homeopathic approach. I was listening to I was watching the floral tribute to Hahnemann this morning, and I was so impressed with how they were sharing the different studies that they are making into the COVID-19 and how they want to not only know the symptoms, but how well the treatment is working. It's absolutely beautiful what we are working with here in homeopathy. Hahnemann does present this though. He says, except those epidemics caused by, he says, some unvarying infections, and Hahnemann specifies there again, aphorism 11, measles and smallpox. Okay, or I guess we can even say chickenpox, because we know we're going to get those little itchy spots, something that causes the same thing again and again and again. Okay, but he doesn't want to say it's going to be the same thing every time. Aphorism 240 expounds further on this. He says we must seek to find an epidemic's own consistent nature common to the individuals affected. Okay, and I know a term that's coming to everybody's mind. We must never allow, however, presumption to override observation. That needs to be there every time when we're looking at things. So aphorisms 101, 102 expound on finding what we term today, and here's this term here as the genus, not genius, genus epidemicus, more as it says here in aphorism 241. But here's just a little bit of an aside I'll just throw at you, a bit of history about the term genus epidemicus. Joel Shepherd in the American Journal of Homeopathic Medicine, in the summer 2020 issue, it's a fantastic electronic issue. You can access this for free at the American Institute of Homeopathy's website. That's homeopathyyusa.org. But in any case, Dr. Shepherd points out that the term genus epidemicus, Hahnemann never used. It was actually, it can actually be attributed to a J.G. Rademacher, a contemporary of Hahnemann, but he never accepted homeopathic axioms. So it's kind of interesting what we need to realize within homeopathy. But in any case, I feel it necessary just to really understand why homeopathy hit the world kind of like a storm as it came forward. Its roots, it's deeply embedded within homeopathy. I don't know how many of you are familiar with in Hahnemann's lesser writings, his writings on the scarlet fever. This is the cure and prevention of scarlet fever. It happened in 1799. It was Hahnemann wrote this down in 1801. This was in the town of Königslutter, Germany, where this was where Hahnemann found this to be. And Hahnemann, it's very, very interesting to read this writing. He says, refers to scarlet fever as a devastating scourge, just nothing to take lightly. Okay, and he explains much about this fever, and much about what he understood about contagious disease, even in 1799, before we knew so much that we know about it today. Okay, he explained the symptoms that he was seeing, and he noted the symptoms were first well treated with homeopathically prepared opium, then ipecacuanha, and then here's what he is found, and this is so very, very interesting, so very, very wonderful that we can say that homeopathy still works the same way today. Hahnemann noted the scarlet fever symptoms very, very specifically. First of all, he noted that there was a woman suspicious of a blanket used by a boy just recovering from scarlet fever. This woman had this blanket. She saw nothing suspicious of this and laid it on a sofa beside which she took her afternoon nap, thus exposing herself, and here's this other nice word, to the miasm of scarlatina. Okay, then her daughter, age 10, would most probably by the morbific exhalations of the mother or by emanations from the counterpane, she came down with the scarlet fever. And these are the symptoms that Hahnemann very specifically shared. Severe oppressive pain in the abdomen, bitter itching on the body and the head, rigor over head and arms, paralytic stiffness of the joints, slept very restlessly, frightful dreams and perspirations all over the body excepting the head, oppressive headache, dimness of vision, slimy tongue. The submaxillary glands were hard, swollen, painful to the touch, shooting pains in the throat on swallowing. No thirst, pale yet hot to the touch. Pain in the abdomen relieved by bending forwards. Think of all this. He found the homeopathically prepared belladonna successfully would treat this. Now, and within 24 hours of one small dose, this young girl had most of the symptoms, disappeared without any crisis. The following day, she was lively, ate and played again, and complained of nothing. So, the other side of the story happened when there was a large family. The eldest daughter was already taking belladonna. For all he says, it's an external affliction on the joints of her fingers. That's all he shares about that. But this eldest daughter had always been the first to take on an illness or an epidemic, but was not affected at all by the scarlet fever that 3 of her siblings had. So Hahnemann, scientist that he was, he said, I think I see some similarities here. So he took this belladonna and he gave it to the other 5 children in this large family, the other 5 children in very small doses. They, he notes, all remained perfectly well without the slightest symptoms throughout the whole course of the epidemic and amid the most virulent scarlatina emanations from their sisters who lay ill with the disease. He says this, I reasoned thus, a remedy that is capable of quickly checking a disease in its onset must be its best preventive. And that's how it got started. Okay, Hahnemann said this further. One of my chief aims is to excite a great interest in the subject of so much importance to humanity as this is. He said further, who can deny that the perfect prevention of infection would offer infinite advantages over any mode of treatment, be it of the most incomparable kind soever? Prevention is better than cure. We hear that as well. Okay. Now it spread very, very quickly. Here's a few other quotes. There's so many quotes about this. You may have heard of James Tyler Kent. He shared, we must look to homeopathy for our protection as well as our cure, and these remedies will enable you to prevent a large number of people from becoming sick. Okay, here's Dr. Grimmer again. As the law of similars excels in the power to cure, It excels more forcibly and certainly in the art of disease prevention. And then let's get back to Dorothy Shepard here. She says the homeopathic preventives are much safer in use and absolutely certain in their effects. Even though the infectious disease develop, it will be, even should it develop, it will be in a much milder form. Just a few things to keep in mind. So let's look specifically about homeopathy here in my country, in the United States. Okay, it was brought to this country in the 1820s and it caught on quickly. Now, there is some argument, but I found this in a couple of sources. It wasn't Constantine Hering who brought it over. It was a gentleman by the name of Hans Birch Gram, who was of Danish descent. He was born of Danish parents in New York. He went to Copenhagen to be trained, and he brought homeopathy back to the United States in 1824. Constantine Hering, though, came over from Germany. He quickly became, we know him here in the United States anyway, as the biggest advocate at the time. Working with Dr. Henry Detwiller, he established the Allentown School of Homeopathy in Pennsylvania in 1836. This is the first homeopathic school in the United States. Now, the education of homeopathic practitioners and the use of homeopathy, it grew so quickly here in this country. Why? Because it was working. Because it works. Because it's simple, it's straightforward, and it works. And there was so many physicians wanting to do homeopathy, so many questions that arose, and this is a lot that I'm not really able to get into. There was a lot of argument that happened among the allopaths towards the homeopaths because they didn't like that the homeopaths were taking away their business. Okay, basically, and we're going to get more into that. But the American Institute of Homeopathy was established in 1844. It is still around today. It is the oldest medical institution in the United States. Technically speaking, the American Medical Association, the AMA, was established in 1847 in retaliation to this because they did not like how strong homeopathy was. There's a big argument in that, and then I'm going to talk about this book in a minute that I will encourage you all to read. But here's a statement indicative of a lot of the thought that was happening at this time. Persons treated by the homeopathic system enjoy more robust health. They are less frequently attacked by disease, and when attacked, recover more speedily than those treated to any other system. With respect to the more fatal classes of disease, the mortality under homeopathy is small in comparison with that of allopathy. That's another thing that I don't have time to get into here is homeopathy and epidemics. There are cases not curable at all under the latter system, which are perfectly curable under the former. Finally, that the medicines prescribed by homeopathists do not injure the constitution, whereas those employed by the allopathists not infrequently entail the more serious and in many cases fatal consequences. That was shared in 1865. We say the same thing today, don't we? Now, here's another thing that's historically solid here in this country, the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, the HPUS. This has been in continuous publication since 1897. This is not a policing agency. I've spoken with their lead scientist. They're not one that will go around and just make sure that you're doing it right. No, that's not their job. They have the policies. They have the guidelines. This is what if you're going to make a homeopathic medicine, this is how it's got to be made, and they will ensure if you want to get their coveted HPUS stamp, they will come out and inspect things to make sure that it is abiding by the principles there. And not every homeopathic medicine here receives this stamp. It's a lot of work to get it. I work with a homeopathic pharmacist not too far from where I live in Dallas, who works very, very hard to get the HPUS stamp. Okay, a lot of homeopathic pharmacies here in the United States will say that they follow HPUS guidelines, but they can't say that they have the stamp because they don't have it. It's just they've got to follow all these things. And it's when you look at something that's been published for more than 100 years, you can trust that it's going to be solid. Now, this is what happened with homeopathy in less than 100 years, from 1824 forward. By 1900, in this infant country, America has no history, no culture. Okay, I used to live overseas, but this is what we're looking at. In less than 100 years, we had 22 homeopathic medical schools. We had at least 100 homeopathic hospitals. There were more than 1,000 homeopathic pharmacies, and at least 20,000 practicing homeopaths. Okay, that's quite a bit, quite a bit. And it led to the establishment. You've probably seen this. I don't know if any of you have actually made it to Washington, D.C. to see this remarkable memorial that was shared for Hahnemann. It's larger than life size. And let's see, I can tell you about this. It was dedicated the 21st of June, 1900 by the U.S. President McKinley. It's got all around it, it's got these wonderful little sculptures. That one says, Die milde Macht ist groß, so the mild power is great. The mild power is great. And also on the other side, it says, in omnibus caritas, in other words, charity in everything. Aude sapere, dare to know, and also nun nutilis vixi, I have not lived in vain. Sayings that Hahnemann loved to encapsulate. The front and the back of it, it's just a very remarkable thing. It's right in downtown Washington, D.C. I work with an attorney I'll mention later, whose practice used to be just a hop, skip, and a jump from the Hahnemann Memorial. I will very much encourage you to see it. Here's even more that you can learn about it right at homeopathyusa.org, the American Institute of Homeopathy's website, because it was because of the AIH that we have this remarkable memorial. I will very much encourage you to see it. There's not a memorial like this, another one like this in the entire world. I'm sure it's been well visited today on Hahnemann's birthday. So here are a few comparative statistics that I wanted to share with you from the United States. From the Civil War period, from 1861 to 65 on forward. And yes, I will talk just a little bit about how well homeopathy works in epidemics and pandemics, but I just want it's going to be encapsulated in very, very small, because that's not my primary focus for this presentation for all of you. Basically, this is the American Institute of Homeopathy sharing this. Dr. I. Thorne was the principal surgeon at the United States Military Hospital in Kansas City, Missouri from 1861 to 63, and reported treating strictly homeopathically 194 cases of pneumonia with only 3 deaths, a mortality of 1.5%. Today, and I had to look this up just to confirm this too, today in the US, the reported mortality rate for community-acquired pneumonia is on average 12%. We're more than 100 years later. On average today, it's 12%. And for hospital-acquired pneumonia, it's 50 to 70%. Additionally, this is from a remarkable book by, his name is Dr. William Bradford. He wanted to do a comparative study between allopathic hospitals, medical institutions, and homeopathic ones. He wanted to have one place just to have tit for tat what the numbers standing beside each other. I finally got a hard copy of this myself. I have an e-copy of this. This is one of the several books that I will very much encourage you to have. It's called, let me hold that up again so you can see it. It's called The Logic of Figures. Again, it's available free online in an e-form, or you can get a printed up copy like what I've got here. This is one of the pages where he's got allopathic, the St. Louis City Hospital, an allopathic hospital on the left, and Cavalry Bureau Hospital on the right. This is, again, reports of the rebellion. He published this in 1900. Okay, they didn't quite call it the Civil War yet, but you can see, look at the percentage of deaths in the allopathic hospital. Whereas you look at the percentage of deaths in the homeopathic hospital, they're negligible. almost none. And the numbers, you can see the cases are almost identical. But look at how well homeopathy was working. Here's another page from Dr. Bradford's book. This is a treatment of diphtheria, several diseases, diphtheria, pneumonia, dysentery, and croup in Broome County, New York. And you can see the death rate there on the far right. Allopathic is on top, homeopathic is on the bottom. The difference there, it's tremendous. Okay, and look at about the pneumonia again. 8.4% compared to 91.6. This is what we have in homeopathy. There should be no question that homeopathy was spreading, or even why homeopathy was spreading, okay, here in the United States, because it works. It's right here. The Spanish flu, it's well talked about today. And I've got several sources for this because I wanted to make sure that everything that I was sharing here was as accurate as it could be. This is another publication from the American Institute of Homeopathy, their journal published in 1919. These are some numbers. This is just the last section of a few of these numbers, but you can see at the bottom the total numbers there. The average mortality. This was not homeopathic hospitals. This was just treatment by homeopathic physicians. The average mortality is 1.056%. Okay, and it shares in the next paragraph that the average mortality in allopathic treatment was right about 30%. You see these numbers again and again and again. We must never allow presumption to override observation. This is something that Hahnemann would say. Often it's asked as far as the Spanish flu. What remedies were used? Well, in this case, the remedy was gelsemium. Will gelsemium work every time? No, it won't. Will gelsemium work for every person? No, it won't. We need to go by the symptoms. But in this case, by and large, it was gelsemium that they were able to use. You have to take into account the cases. So this is what we're looking at. So let's look more to the current day, where we are right now. Well, we still need to go back a little bit to the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. This was established in 1838. And a little bit behind this, that not everybody knows, this was introduced by a senator from New York State. His name was Royal S. Copeland. Guess what? He was a homeopath. He was a homeopath, okay? And this was introduced because there was a deadly antibiotic called sulfanilamide that was widely promoted but had killed more than 100 people. Yes, we can think about where we are today. This is just where what they were looking at with this sulfanilamide. Okay, so Royal Copeland realized we've got to have something bigger. So he worked to establish the Food and Drug Administration. It was originally known as the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. Okay, they removed the word cosmetic, but you can understand that it needed to be part of it as well. Now, here's something interesting. The attorney that I work with, his name is Jim Turner. His practice is in Washington, D.C. It's Swankin Turner. He has been under care of a homeopath since 1970. That's 1970. He loves homeopathy. I'm very, very glad to have met him. I introduced him to homeoprophylaxis in about 2014. He loves that. When I was putting together the New Delhi conference, I actually had a meeting with Jim Turner and Dr. Manchanda, who was in the video that you saw earlier. And Jim, who actually spent quite a bit of time when he was younger in the nation of India, he said that actually because his practices in Washington D.C., he works a lot with the FDA. He actually found out that guess what, the Healthcare Act, this Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, the Department of Health, the Drugs and Cosmetics Acts and rules established in 1940, this is patented originally exactly after the U.S. FDA. So that's where they are. That's where we are. Now, this is something that it says very specifically several times throughout the FDCA Act. It says these words right here. Whenever a drug is recognized in both the United States Pharmacopoeia and the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, it shall be subject to the requirements of the United States Pharmacopoeia unless it is labeled and offered for sale as a homeopathic drug, in which case it shall be subject to the provisions of the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of the United States, and not to those of the United States Pharmacopoeia. In other words, it has been expected that allopathic, conventional medicine, and homeopathic medicine would respectfully coexist. It's not a conventional medicine. It's called homeopathic, so we're going to have the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia be the judge and jurisdiction over it. Okay, unfortunately, in the US, it has become not so much, and I'm going to get into that in just a moment. Through the 20th century, homeopathy has taken quite a different path in my country, in the United States. There was, towards the end of the 19th century into the early 20th century, there was a lot that happened. The Rockefellers, their money, they decided that they wanted to support conventional medicine. So they poured their money into conventional educational facilities, conventional universities. They wanted that to take the place, and it nearly thumped homeopathy, but it didn't quite work. But let me explain this. Here's the book that I would really encourage you all to get. Here's my copy of this here, Divided Legacy. This is the third, it's actually a 4-volume series. This is volume number 3, The Conflict Between Homeopathy and the American Medical Association. Is it just a U.S. book? No, it's American Medical Association. Yes. And Harris Coulter, he was an American. But what he gets into in this book, and they're all very, very thick books. All the volumes are. It gets into the history of the arguing sides of medical thought and approach, basically the empirical and the rational schools. Okay, they've been arguing since at least Hippocrates' time. See, it keeps going back and forth. One of them ever has more money, power, and influence than the other. Okay, that's just how it's always been, and a resolution between these two will likely never be reached, unfortunately. But understanding what they are, understanding what we are in the middle of, homeopathy is very much an empirical approach, a whole approach, and I get more into this in other presentations that I make. The rational school is conventional. Let's define it down. We've got to find just the smallest point. Okay. This book is something that will very, very much open your minds to really where we are in homeopathy, especially today during this COVID-19, where people don't even want to look at homeopathy, but look at what homeopathy is doing as far as treating and curing so many who are afflicted by this coronavirus. So, and here's the other argument that's happening, pharmaceutical issues within the U.S. and historically, okay? You can liken this to what's going on today too. What was and still is practiced within homeopathy provided a challenge/threat to pharmacists and their profession. Basically, physicians and homeopaths, this is what allopathic medicine says, should not be allowed to provide their own medicines. Really? K. Hahnemann had a strong dislike towards the apothecaries whose sole drive, he said, was to get patients onto as many drugs as possible. Yeah, it was happening even back then too. Okay, Volko Hahnemann, knowing his organon, knowing the many works that he left us, he wasn't ever afraid to share his opinion. So he made his dislike of this situation quite clear, and their pursuit of him because of this was why he had to move repeatedly, what it boils down to. So to this day, homeopathic principles have not changed. We still teach using the minimum dose, okay? And the homeopath must be intimately acquainted with his materia medica. I don't speak Spanish, but the last couple of presentations I was looking at the remedies and what they're being shared, what they're good for. I love learning this stuff. I love learning this stuff. I love researching things for my clientele so I can find what will identify, what will work with the symptoms they want help with. This is what we love within homeopathy. The homeopath must be intimately acquainted with his materia medica so that he will know, he or she, what he is giving to his patients or clients and why. Allopathic conventional medicine doesn't want that to be done. Okay. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration established back in 1988, this is what we're in the middle of right now, the CPG, the Compliance Policy Guidance, Section 400.400, entitled Conditions Under Which Homeopathic Drugs May Be Marketed. Okay, and this was very, very effective. It was established firmly what a homeopathic medicine is. In effective use, it's been in effective use for more than 30 years. Within the United States, what is defining again what is homeopathic, what is not. December 2017, however, the FDA proposed a draft guidance to practice more control over homeopathic medicines. January of 2018, there happened the rise of a consumer group within the United States in retaliation to this. This group is known as Americans for Homeopathy Choice. Their website is homeopathychoice.org. Okay, a tremendous group, began by consumers. I tied them in with Jim Turner. And let me tell you, that was a match made in heaven because Jim Turner speaks very strongly of the power of the consumer's voice. And because of this, before this, no, let me say this again. Because of the power of Americans for Homeopathy Choice, the FDA actually, I was able to speak with them. The Americans for Homeopathy Choice has spoken with the FDA as well. But for some reason, in October of 2019, the FDA inexplicably pulled this CPG section 400.4 and it just yanked it. It's not there anymore. What? Why did they do that? Oh, the Americans for Homeopathy Choice is working on that because of the work of the Americans for Homeopathy Choice and Jim Turner, and homeopaths and homeopathic organizations within the United States. Within the U.S. FDA are listening to us. We've still got a lot of work to do, but they're listening to these voices. That's what we're in the middle of right now. Homeopathy is becoming better known and accepted and utilized here in the United States. There's at least 6 million, last I checked, that's where we were, at least 6 million people in this country are using homeopathy. Okay, there's a growing number of HPUS approved homeopathic pharmacies. I know of at least, 3 or 4 of them right now that are actually getting that HPUS stamp right now. Not just the claim that their product follows the HPUS guidelines. They're taking it very seriously. There are a growing number of homeopathic schools and training opportunities. They're not all schools, but a lot of young moms want to use something non-toxic for themselves, for their children. Okay, and they're learning to use homeopathy for themselves. Okay, there's still a ways to go to get where homeopathy once was here in the United States, but there are still excellent homeopaths and homeopathic research happening here in the United States. As in the world, there is a growing interest in complementary and alternative medicine, or CAM, as we know it. People are wanting this again. They're tired of realizing the dishonesty that has been played on them. They simply want to be well. Homeopathic medicine has been providing this for more than 200 years. Truth will always prevail. It will never be completely done away with, all right? So here's just a few of the references that I've used. I'll be happy to share with you more. All you need to do is contact me, just write me through my website. And I just want to thank you for your time here. And happy birthday to Samuel Hahnemann. Thank you very much.